When it comes to prosperity, we certainly cannot take it for granted. And there's a lot of key policies that make our prosperity in Canada and across the West possible. And so today we're going to talk about the keys to prosperity and what's going on both in the United States and certainly across the Western world, including Canada.
A clear path forward requires looking back and learning. Good public policy requires human connection. It's a consideration of the facts, applying common sense and innovation. It's urban, it's rural, it's real life. We all have something to contribute. We all have a responsibility to get informed because there's a little piece of Canada in all of us, isn't there? Let's learn on this path together. This is Leaders on the Frontier.
Steve Moore is certainly one of my heroes. He's a leading economic analyst. You can read him a lot in terms of the Wall Street Journal and so many other mainstream media. And with me here today is certainly one of the leading American economic analysts, Steve Moore. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you so much. A pleasure to be with you guys.
Well, Steve, it's great to have you. And I know you're one of the leaders on the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. And you know a lot of, I think, really the greats in terms of really that have really brought clarity around economic analysis and thinking. I'm thinking of Steve Forbes and the great Art Laffer. So can you tell us, first of all, about the Committee to Unleash Prosperity? What is that initiative?
Well, this is an organization we started back in 2015, and you're going to love this. It was Steve Forbes and Larry Kudlow and Arthur Laffer and myself, and we call ourselves the Supply Side Beatles. And I'm Ringo. I bang on the drums, and they make the beautiful music. But Arthur Laffer and Steve Forbes and Larry Kudlow are icons, and we use the committee to speak use it as a platform for all of us to try to influence policy here in the United States and around the world, and in the states, the governors, the mayors of the country. And so it's been a successful venture, in large part because of the enormous prestige that those three bring to the table. And I would just say that if anyone would like to get our free, no inflation here, our
Indeed.
free, what we call our morning hotline, just go to committee.unleashprosperity.com and sign up, and we will send it to you for free. So, not selling anybody anything, but if you want to get a good little economic analysis and political analysis every morning. And by the way, we've been paying attention to what's happening in Canada, and I don't like it at all.
Well, we're going to get into that because I tell you, there's a lot, as you say, going on in Canada. And in all fairness, we really want to examine those policies and say, like, who are they serving and how do we improve things? Because, when we look to our friend and neighbor in the United States, we see a long history of prosperity, and we can't take those things for granted. So, just let me clarify. You used a term supply side economics. I know that other citizens on the left spectrum or socialists like to mischaracterize it. But what is supply side economics, Steve?
Well, first of all, we all know, I think everyone watching this show or listening to the show knows that the goose that lays the golden eggs of prosperity is the free enterprise system, right? Not government.
Indeed.
It's free markets and free people, and the explosion of investment and entrepreneurship. That's really been the key to American prosperity and Canadian prosperity as well, and
Mhm.
that is under assault in the United States and Canada and much of Europe. And it pains me to say that. Now, in terms of, how do you create prosperity? One of the points that, Laffer and Kudlow and Steve Forbes and I like to make is that it really isn't that complicated. You really don't need a PhD in economics to understand how to grow an economy. You need a sound currency that retains its value, is stable in its value.
Mhm.
The good news for the most part we have that in the United States, although we've had a big run of inflation. You need free trade. You need a tax system that doesn't take the fruits of people's labor and
Mhm.
investment, and you need minimal government. I mean, obviously, we need government, but we need to make sure that it doesn't stand in the way of the progress that we need in this country. And right now, I have to say, despite all the things that Biden is trying to do to hurt our economy, it is true that we do have the strongest economy in the world right now. And that's just a testament to, our people and our entrepreneurial ability. But I worry about our future, as I think so many Americans do. And so, when I say we have got the best economy, I'm kind of saying we're the tallest midget in the room because most of the rest of the world is not getting it right now. And, we should be seeing a glorious period of prosperity, but it's not happening. And that's because, in part, a lot of countries look to the United States for the leadership, and we're not providing it. We're doing a lot of the wrong things here, and a lot of the other countries are learning the wrong lessons from us.
No, I would definitely agree, and I think that your, um, dare I say, the Goldilocks formula. You said currency, free trade, not too much government, or like reasonable regulation. And what was the fourth one you mentioned?
You need the stable currency. You need
You need
because
a
without
stable
a
currency.
currency that holds its value, you don't can't. It's hard uh, to involve yourself in commerce if you don't have a currency. And so those are obvious things. We want to, I'm advising Donald Trump in this campaign on the economy as I did in 2016, and we want to get the taxes low. We want to that is to make sure that especially the tax rates. Joe Biden is going around the country saying we're going to soak the rich. If you do that, you're not going to have a lot of rich people to soak. That's the problem.
Indeed.
And so that policy has never worked anywhere or any time. I know that you have those inclinations and your Canadian government too. Sock it to the rich. Well, guess what? They find ways around paying the taxes. They could leave. We have,
Mhm,
as you know, we're more than Canada, we're really oriented towards states and having the
mhm,
states decide their policies. Well, we have 9 states that have no income tax, and then we have very liberal states like California and New York and New Jersey and my home state of Illinois, where Chicago is, and everybody's
mhm,
leaving. They're leaving those states and they're going to places where taxes are low. So those are what Arthur Laffer would call the pillars of prosperity. And
mhm.
if we could get political leaders like yours to follow those principles, everybody would be better off, especially the poor, by the way. The people who get hurt the most when you have a economy that's not working are the people at the bottom.
No, I totally agree. The irony is that so many talk about the need for a larger government when in fact, who really is served by that? Is it just a few special interests, if you will, or is it really working people in our country? So, speaking of our countries, I did want to give you a little bit of a measure of the mood in Canada. I know you've been a keen observer of our country, but there's a real affordability crisis, if that doesn't sound familiar to you in the United States, but a real concern about a decrease in our standard of living. We've looked at certainly the last 12 quarters, if it serves me correctly, my memory, of declining productivity. I mean, this is a foreshadow of a nation on decline. We even have all kinds of anecdotes around one in 10 people in the larger Toronto area relying on food banks on a regular basis. I mean, this is unheard of. And then you have a whole dynamic of really a generation, a younger generation in particular, that really doesn't have a hope that they could um, own a home in many different markets from Vancouver to Toronto. But these are really train wrecks of affordability. So, is that what you're seeing in our country as you look at the stats?
Well, I haven't. I'm kind of looking at Canada from afar, but I'm paying very close attention to what's happening here in the
Hmm.
United States, and um, it's not a pretty picture right now. I mean, the middle class is getting hammered by the high
Hmm.
inflation. Most American families, the median family in America, is poorer today than they were 3 years ago when
Hmm.
you adjust for
Hmm.
inflation. So they've lost ground. And so when Joe Biden runs around the country saying how wonderful everything is, yeah, our GDP is higher, the stock market's doing well, and I'm in favor of
Hmm.
those things for sure. But if you go to the grocery store, if you go to the gas pumps here, if you go, look at people paying their rent or their mortgage or their electric bills, people are angry. They're very angry and they're stressed out
They really are.
financially. They should be because we've seen inflation. When you look at the essentials that Americans have to buy, inflation's up by about, I don't know, 25%. and people's paychecks are up maybe 16, 17, 18%. So do the math there.
Mm,
They're getting when your cost of living rises by 25% and your paycheck rises by, 18%, you're falling behind. And so there is a sense of financial insecurity in the country. I'll give you one example, just in terms of housing. We have a housing crisis here, and you use the word affordability. That's a good word to use. People can't afford a new home. And, I have two sons that are in their 30s. They can't buy a house. This is about the time when people start to think about, buying a
mm,
starter home. Well, they can't pay the mortgage, because the mortgage prices have doubled and just, for a 30-year mortgage. That's probably happening
mm,
in Canada as well. So we
mhm.
believe that the American dream, or there's a lot of components to the great American dream, but one of those components is to own your own home. And when you're pricing
Exactly.
people out, that's a big problem.
Indeed. And so the Canadian dream, that's a phrase that we use in our country, of course, is really being undermined. And we think it's really because of bad government policy.
Of course.
And so
So
in that,
let me address that, because it's a really important point you're making, is that this runaway inflation that happened when Biden came into office. And let's not forget that when Trump left office, we had a 1.5% inflation rate. And in
Mhm,
18 months, Biden took it from 1.5% to 9%. That's pretty, I wouldn't have thought any president could run the country off the tracks that quickly as he did. And we saw the inflation recede last year, but guess what? It's picking up again because we're not
mm,
controlling our government spending. And look, I'm not blaming only Joe Biden. I mean, the Republicans in Congress are not very good at we don't have
indeed.
many fiscal conservatives left in either party. And that's one of the things that's keeping me up at night when, we're borrowing $1.5 trillion a year. Now, borrowing in and of itself is not a bad thing, but you've got
Mm,
to look at what you're getting for your money. We're not building things. We're just using the
mhm.
money to pay for our bills. And it's like
Yeah.
going out and drinking. If you and I went out drinking tonight, we'd have a great time. We could be dancing on the tables, but then we can't get out of bed in the morning. And that's what we're doing. That's what worries me about the trend we're on. And it can't continue. There will be a reckoning. And I get asked this all the time. Well, when is it going to happen? When is it going to collapse? I don't know if it's going to be 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years from now, but I guarantee you, if we continue doing what we're doing in the US, and I'd say the same for Canada, that story will not have a happy ending.
Wow. So in that context, we can't take our prosperity for granted. And so just the other week, we had another federal budget. Obviously, we have a lot of governments in Canada, certainly at the federal and provincial levels. But at the federal level, we have a deficit of some $40 billion. We've got an accumulated debt of $1.25 trillion. That's more money has been accumulated in debt under this federal administration than all the others combined, all the way up to our first prime minister, Sir John A.
Yes.
Macdonald. It's just mind-boggling. So, in this context, they've introduced a budget. They're increasing many things, not to which are taxes. And I want to go through some of those items quickly and just get your opinion. But this whole increase on capital gains, they've increased this significantly so that if you've got a capital gains over $250,000, that's it. Your marginal tax rate is going to increase even higher to 2/3. So, is that a good idea to increase those capital gains even further, Steve? What do you think?
Well, listen, I mean, the correct rate of tax on capital gains is zero, right? Because the company already paid the
Zero.
tax and then you're taxing them twice. And we have the same issue here in the US where Biden wants to double our capital gains tax. He wants to increase the tax on dividends that companies pay. He wants to increase the corporate tax. And then he wants to tax people at death if they hold on to the stock. So you get hit two or three times, and the effective tax rate on, say, $1 million investment could go as high as 60 to 70%. Well, look, again, economics is not complicated. Is if
Mm.
you had Arthur Laffer on with you right now, he'd say, what he's always says, if you tax something, you're going to get less of it, right? This is, why do we
Sorry,
tax
can you
cigarettes?
repeat that again? That sounds like a
Right.
profound point.
If you tax something, you're going to get less of it. So when you tax people on their investment, are they going to invest more or less? I think most seventh graders could probably answer that question, but most politicians can't.
I think you're absolutely right. In fact, the reaction has been interesting. We even have in different quarters people saying, like, I'm a small business person. I'm relying on those gains that I've worked so hard. And I've ridden the ups and downs of really low income to be able to appreciate the value of my business. And then all of a sudden the government swoops in. It's almost like a wealth tax. And it's something that's going to drive investment away from our country, and so this is all going to hurt every Canadian, isn't it, in terms of future prosperity, let alone every American in the Biden context?
Look, um, in Canada and in the United States, what we want is the best pro-investment climate possible, because investment is the seed corn of a growing economy. And if you
Indeed.
don't have investment, you don't have businesses. If you don't have businesses, you don't have workers. And if you don't have workers, you don't have any output, and you go straight to the poorhouse. So, everyone knows that you need investment. These are the people who invest in startup companies. These are the people who help start Google and Apple and Amazon and these
Hmm.
great, companies in the US. And we're proud of the fact that we have, six of the seven biggest companies in the world are American companies, and they were all built, in garages, with startup capital. So you need to do that, and you need to treat capital kindly, because if you don't, it's going to go somewhere else. It's easy. I'm looking at you on my computer. I could, with a click of my butt, uh, on my keyboard, I could transfer money out of the United States somewhere else. And, and just like anybody can, and certainly millionaires and billionaires can do it. So if you try to tax them here, you won't find it. You're not going to be able to
I
tax it.
think you're right.
Millionaires and billionaires didn't get rich by being stupid. They're going to find
Exactly.
ways around this. And that's why all these soak the rich policies, who gets wet? The middle class gets wet, not the rich. They find ways around
Yeah,
paying these taxes.
precisely. I'm with you, Steve. I like your way of thinking here. We've got to protect those people in the garages, the tinkerers, the inventors. And if you tax them, then they go elsewhere. I mean, it's not complicated. So, and those are really the family jewels. It's our future because things are changing all the time. Where businesses that existed some 50 years ago are long gone, and so we're trying to nurture the next set of innovators. So,
Can I make another point about this? Because
yeah.
you're on to something important. So let's just even assume that you could get the money from the rich. I don't think you're going to, but let's say you could. Well,
Mhm.
wait a minute. Who do you think can invest money more wisely? Someone like a Bill Gates and a Carl Icahn, or or politicians? you know, Politicians aren't very good at investing money. Why not let the people who've shown that they are smart and they're brilliant and they know how to build things, uh, you know, let them do it. I don't understand this mindset that the government is going to be able to invest in a smarter way. I mean, we've tried that under Biden. We keep investing more and more money in electric vehicles and solar panels and windmills, and they're nowhere. We're not, the private sector always beats the government bureaucrats, and so it's just a bad way to invest, even if you could get the money, which is very difficult to do.
Indeed. So, Steve, I have a an interesting question that relates to the tale of two different countries, Canada and the United States, where you have in Canada now, we have a significant prosperity gap between our two countries. And I think you've seen this, where basically in most families in Canada, there's a 20,000, almost a $20,000 differential now. And this is widening. It's not getting smaller. Like years ago, it was almost the same. In fact, in some parts in Canada, we had a higher level of income. And now we have, for instance, in the province of Ontario, the family average income is about the same as, in all due respect, to Mississippi. So, what the heck is going on here that explains that widening gap between our countries?
Well, first of all, I'm not an expert on the Canadian economy, but just from afar, I would say that the very simple and short answer to your question is you're more socialist than we are. And you have government try to do more of the things in your economy than we do. And so there's no reason that Canada could not be wealthier. You have incredible resources. You have very smart people. You have a great education system. I mean, you have all the
Hmm.
building blocks for a very prosperous economy, and yet you have leaders. And I literally scratch my head and say, I mean, for example, you are Canada and the United States have more oil and gas and coal than any other countries in the world, and
Yeah, it's astounding.
your idiot politicians don't want to use them. It's like it's almost like in Canada, you've got this multi-trillion-dollar treasure chest,
Mhm.
and they say, no, we're not going to get it. Why?
Mhm.
It's
No,
so stupid. I mean,
it's dumbfounding.
you're not
Yeah.
going to solve the climate change problem by not using your own resources.
No,
If you don't
it's
use it in
remarkable.
Canada, you're going to get the oil and gas and coal from China and from Iran and from Venezuela and
Mhm.
then Saudi Arabia and OPEC countries. I don't even understand the mindset in Canada why you
Mhm.
wouldn't. Same thing with both the United States and Canada have
Mhm.
enormous amounts of mineral resources. I mean,
Mhm.
you have them in the mountains of Canada, we have them in Montana, and we have them in the Dakotas,
Yes.
and our idiot politicians say, well, you can't get them. So then, oh,
No,
okay, we'll
it
get them
is
from China.
truly a head scratcher. But in
Yeah.
that context, though, we all know the refrain. Well, there's a climate crisis. It's existential. I can see little Greta Thunberg's finger wagging at us and saying, how dare you? So we've got to move to quote green energy, but that's just a subsidy game, is it not, Steve?
Um, Look, I'm not a. Let me put it like this: climate change is not something that's keeping me up at night. What does keep me up at night is how do we make sure our country is safe and secure and prosperous?
Mhm.
And
Right.
I believe that if there is a climate crisis, and I do not believe there is, but I know a lot of the people listening to the
Hmm.
show and watching it may believe it is. You're not, government isn't going to solve this. I mean,
Hmm.
really, the government can't do anything. They can't deliver the
Hmm.
mail. They can't fill the potholes. They can't secure the border. They can't balance the budget. And we're going to ask them to change the temperature of the planet. It will happen through technology and through
Hmm.
know-how and innovation.
Hmm.
So by
Right.
holding back your economy, you're actually making it more difficult to deal with the crises. Look, I'll give you one example, and you know this, that fewer people today die from hurricanes and earthquakes and tornadoes
Indeed.
and droughts and floods than ever before in history. Even and why is that? Because as we become richer, we find ways to combat Mother Nature, right? And we're pretty good at it. And
Mhm.
so the best way to combat climate change as it's happening is to continue with rapid technological progress so we can
Mhm.
deal with it. The whole condition of the human condition has been to deal with Mother Nature, right? And to figure out how
Indeed.
to keep warm in the winter and how to keep you know uh, cooler. And I laugh at these climate change people say we have to get rid of air conditioning. I say, wait a minute, if the temperature is rising, don't we want more air conditioning, not less air conditioning?
That's fine. Yeah. No, it's a great story about how humankind has adapted to all kinds of conditions, and even the environmental panels at the United Nations are talking about 1 degree over 80 years. So you mean to say we can't even adapt to that if you believe their models? So it's
Well,
a
by the
it's
way,
a
and also
fascinating
there,
discussion.
even if you accept what they're saying, like if we do all these crazy things that the left wants to do, at the
Mhm.
very most, that might reduce the global temperature by 0.1 degree. So how is
Mhm.
that going to save the planet?
Exactly. Yeah. So let's keep a rational head here. Let's not use crisis after crisis as a kind of a rationale to do all kinds of other things to really really do a lot of damage to people's lives. I think.
Well, we lived through. We were just talking about climate change. We also lived through, the pandemic and COVID, and we saw, governments. And I don't know exactly what happened in Canada, but in the United States, we gave more power to the government than any time in history. And almost
Indeed.
everything the government did in response to COVID, at least in the United States, we now know was exactly the wrong thing to do. We should have never locked down our economy. We should have never shut down our
Hmm.
schools and our churches.
Yeah.
We should not mandate that people take a vaccine. I'm not against vaccines, but I'm against
Hmm.
requiring people to take vaccines. We should uh, we should have protected vulnerable people, and then made sure that younger people could get on with their lives and continue to produce. And then the question is, why didn't we do that? And why didn't most countries like Canada do that? And it's because the government likes to control our lives. And so they loved being able to tell people what they could. I mean, we had in many areas you couldn't even go out of your home for goodness sake. It was like you were in a prison cell.
Mhm. It really is absurd, and there are many, many lessons learned from COVID-19. I think you've written about this as well, as we have certainly a lot at Frontier. But I find it also interesting, like there's so many major challenges that face us. And one of them, as we've talked about, is housing. And our friend, senior fellow at Frontier, is Wendell Cox, who you know so well. But when we look at the issue of housing, is it pretty obvious as to what the solutions are? I mean, how was this problem created, Stephen, from your perspective?
You mean, are you talking about the housing issue?
Housing affordability,
Yeah.
yes.
That's a complicated one. We're scratching our heads trying to figure out what we can do to build more housing or
Hmm.
more affordable housing. And I have to say this is not my great area of expertise, but I do believe that if you had, we a lot of places in the United States, like Los Angeles and Chicago, where the urban areas, we put all sorts of land use regulations on where housing could be built. I don't know if that's a problem in Canada, but it's a big
Very much so.
problem here.
Yes.
And so if you restrict the supply of something, what happens to its price? It goes up. And so we need to basically let people build out housing and in an affordable way. But this, you can blame most of this on government zoning regulations and land use restrictions.
Mhm. And I think that's the same story, definitely within select markets in Canada. For example, in Vancouver, where the price of a home is some 14 times the average family income. It's
Right.
not the price of the house, because it costs the same to build a house in Vancouver as it does in Winnipeg or in Charlottetown, PEI. It's the difference is really the land price, which is a reflection of that kind of bubble that the government's created. So they need to open up land in a sensible way. Not everybody wants to live in a small shoebox up in the sky in a condominium, but they do want to have land to be able to live in. And so for us in Canada, it's a little bit of a head scratcher too, because this is all juxtaposed to the issue of immigration. And we have a record number of immigrants coming into Canada. It's hard to know exactly what the number is, but it's approaching 1.5 million a year, which is among the highest of any Western country. I mean, it's almost like a de facto open border. And this reminds me of the same kind of situation in the United States where it seems like they have an open border there and it's being facilitated by your government. And I look at this and say, how does this serve anybody, Steve, in terms of having such a flood of immigrants coming into the country?
So first of all, you're not going to find anybody who's more pro-immigration than I am. I think immigrants are
Hmm.
they're one
Of
of the
course.
most important features of both the Canadian and U.S. economy, and we're importing human talent and skilled people and people who want to share our freedoms and
Hmm.
liberties, and I'm all for that. But there's been no president in my lifetime who's done more to erode public confidence in the immigration system than Joe Biden. Americans, for the most part, we cherish the fact, just as Canada does, that we're a country of immigrants. But people are angry. I don't know if they're angry in Canada, but they're angry here
Indeed.
about what's
Yes.
happened. We don't know if these people are terrorists. We don't know if they're drug runners. We don't know if they're mentally ill. We don't know,
Hmm.
if they have diseases. I mean, this is out of control, and it's undermined, the public support for a pro-growth immigration policy. So
Hmm.
I'm frustrated by this. I think Biden has done more, as I said, to undermine our support for a rational. Now, look, Donald Trump, we had the border pretty secure,
Hmm.
by the time he was left office, and then Biden
Hmm.
comes in and says, anybody can come in, and we just stopped enforcing the border. So it's a damn mess right now, and it probably is the same thing in Canada. And
Yeah.
the shame of this is, we need the talented people. We need people who want to come here and work, but you have to do it the right way. And you
Indeed.
can't
Yeah.
just say
No, nobody's against immigration per se, but it needs to be legal and well managed that serves existing citizens. So what is the
exactly.
rational reason that anyone would pursue these kinds of policies to this degree
Oh,
because
well, the answer
it
to
is
that
creating a
question
lot of
is, yeah,
disruption.
the answer to
What's
that
that?
question is obvious, isn't it? I mean, I think I think you're if your smart viewers and listeners know, because Joe Biden wants these people to come in so they can vote, so they can reelect him. And
Yeah.
they're not even checking now whether people are citizens when they vote. So that that's a big part of it, and I
So,
know that
so
sounds like a
you're saying
cynical answer.
they don't check, Steve, if you're a citizen to vote in the United States in
Well,
some
it
quarters?
depends on what state you're in. You know,
Yeah.
some states do a good job of it, some states don't. In Pennsylvania, we'd had mass cheating. Now, I'm not going to get into an argument about whether the election was stolen, but I
Hmm.
think we have a lot of problems with election integrity right now in the
Hmm.
United States.
Hmm.
And I want everybody who's eligible to be able to vote, but I don't. You can't have illegal immigrants coming in and voting. But the other part of this, I think that it's a misguided view of the world by the leftists who think, we can just let anybody in. And they don't understand that the middle class of this country is revolting against this. It's so interesting
Hmm.
working for Trump. When I got started in politics 40 years ago, Republicans were the party of of the rich.
Hmm.
Now, and that's an oversimplification, but the richer
Yeah.
someone was, the more likely they would vote for the Republicans. Now,
Hmm.
the richer people are, the more likely they'll vote for Democrats. So the very rich in the United States support Biden, and so who supports Trump? Working class Americans who are just sick of these policies
Yeah.
that are impoverishing our country. I don't know if that's
Okay,
happening
but
in Canada.
well, I think a similar dynamic. It's almost like we're telling Steve a tale of two countries here together. But
Yes.
in Canada, we have, I think, again, a coalition government, the New Democratic Party, the Socialist Party of our country, governing side by side with the Liberals, who've really gone a hard left in terms of policies, and have in many ways abandoned the middle and working class. They've almost adopted kind of the rote kind of radical left's playbook and ideology and policy. So I don't mean that in a partisan way. I just think that it is fascinating because, again, traditionally conservatives have been kind of stereotypes as the party of the better off, the middle class, and the better off. So there's an interesting paradox developing where it seems like people who want a future, who are middle class and working class, are finding their home in those kinds of populist kind of conservative parties.
Yeah, that's right. And so you have a situation where Trump is really speaking for middle class, working class Americans. It's interesting, for example,
Mhm.
here, all the union bosses support Biden, but all the union members, the rank and file members, not all of them, but the vast majority of
Hmm.
them support Trump. So here you have a
Isn't that
situation where the
interesting?
unions are not even reflecting the opinion of and the desires of
Hmm.
their own members. And so
Yeah.
it's going to be, look, it's going to be a monumentally important election that we have in November. I think that, we always say this is the most important election, but it's really critical. I mean, you've got Joe Biden,
Hmm.
who, to his credit, he's telling the American people what he's going to do if he gets reelected. He's going to raise taxes through the roof. He's going to continue to massively increase our debt and our spending. He's going to continue to re regulate
Hmm.
the economy. He's going to continue to let illegal immigrants flow over the border. And Trump is basically saying we're going to have better trade deals. We're going to use American energy. We're going to
Hmm.
get control of the border. We're going to, make America more competitive by getting tough with China and other countries. And worked the first time. So I hope Americans see that it can work again.
Interesting. So, in that context, one of the things I'm observing in the polls, I tend to look at Rasmussen as an example of polls in the United States. It seems like there's a significant wave of support moving, interestingly, from the Black community and Hispanic communities to the Make America Great Republican Party. Does that surprise you? And if so, does that mean that the traditional kind of Democratic coalition now to support those Democratic policies is really kind of falling apart? Or am I misreading this?
No, you're not misleading the polls, but I guess I'll believe it when I see it. So ask me that
Mm,
question in November. I mean, it's one thing what people might
yeah.
say in a poll, it's another how they vote. So I'm a little skeptical. I mean, look, I hope those polls are right. I'm a Republican, but let's
Hmm.
see. Let's see how they actually
Hmm.
vote. I mean, if those polls are right, then Republicans will win. If they can win 40 to 50% of the Hispanic vote and 20% of the black vote, the Republicans will win. But I'm a little
Hmm.
skeptical when push comes to shove
Okay.
whether those numbers come through. But it is
Yeah.
true, as a general matter, that Hispanics are becoming more conservative and more
Hmm.
Republican. The
Hmm.
black community, I'm not so sure. So we'll see.
Okay. We'll see. So I did want to look at this picture a little bit more strategically as well when it relates to the theme of prosperity, Steve, and that is how does the rule of law relate to prosperity? And I want to use a number of examples. And an easy one is obviously the incredible set of lawsuits and the use of so-called lawfare, basically using the law to put your political opponent, shut them down, or even worse, put them in jail. But in this case, like that real estate deal where there was that evaluation of the judge that somehow Donald Trump was guilty of falsely evaluating real estate in Manhattan. It seemed like such a bogus case. I mean, that is done all the time by anyone involved in real estate. You know that. But wouldn't that create a shockwave of people through investment communities, not the least of which would be in New York State, of all things, that this is not a place to invest? I mean, is there not a significant relationship between the equal, sensible, rational application of the law so that prosperity can happen in our country, Steve?
Of course, yes. You're really onto something there. And, I'm very fearful of what's happened to our judicial justice system in America. If
Hmm.
people are seeing what they're doing to Donald Trump, and any fair-minded person would say this is just a witch hunt. This is a three-ring
Hmm.
circus. It's a two-tier justice system. These are the same people who wanted to impeach Trump 1 year after he was elected with this phony, Russia collusion story, and they spent a year and
Yes,
a half trying to
bizarre.
get rid of him.
Yeah.
These look, the left in America will do anything to try to destroy Donald Trump, and so. These lawsuits. I mean, the good news is the more they go after Trump, the more popular he becomes because most
Hmm.
Americans are fair minded. They see that these are just scam lawsuits. It's amazing because, I'm working on the campaign. We're trying to get Trump to go around the country and campaign. Well, he can't because they've got him locked
Hmm.
in New York, for this crazy
Bizarre.
lunatic
Yeah.
lawsuit that, anywhere else. See, the problem is Trump can't get a fair trial in New York. He's probably going to get convicted because this is a place where 90% of the voters are against Trump. So how is he going to get,
Hmm.
a fair trial? Same thing with Washington D.C. So I really worry about it. I think that the justice system is really contaminated right now, and you're
Hmm.
right that this really, if you don't have as you said, a rule of law, and you don't know what the rules are, then that makes it it makes it not a great place to invest in. So
Hmm.
it is a big economic and civil liberties issue. And the
Hmm.
left, the one change that I've seen in my 35 years or so in this business is when I got started. I'm more of a conservative on the right, but we had a left that believed in civil liberties. The left in
Exactly.
America
Yes.
does not believe in civil liberties. They believe in government controlling people's lives. And so, for example,
Okay.
the so-called American Civil Liberties Union doesn't even exist anymore. They're all about racism and DEI.
Hmm.
So that's scary to me that the left seems to think today that not just in terms of government control of the economy, but the government control of your life.
Hmm.
They're not concerned about that. And I'm a libertarian. I want the government to, obviously enforce the laws, but I don't want the government telling Americans what they can and can't do. That's just my own, and we more and more the government, we have Biden saying he's going to tell you what kind of car you can buy. He's going to tell you whether you can have a gas stove in your house. He's going to tell
Hmm.
you, how you live your life. And I
Hmm.
think hopefully there's a revolt against that. They want to ban everything here. I don't know if you have in Canada or not, but I mean everything we use they want to ban.
Oh, of course. We can't even get plastic straws. I mean, it's absurd. They don't
Exactly.
even work, these little cardboard things. They all disintegrate. So it
Yeah.
truly is crazy. So, you have this strange mixture of a kind of a corruption within in the political scene where things are used to just kind of bludgeon your opponent and lambaste them and attack them personally. But what I also observe is almost like an infection of an ideology. You've alluded to it, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's almost like a mantra, a religion among a number of political leaders. And so my question to you is, and it's interesting today is where we've heard a lot about the protests in favor of Hamas, or some would refer to as very anti-Semitic. We've had the same type of issues in universities in Canada. I mean, it's horrifying, these images post October 7 and the attacks on Israel. But in this context, is there increasingly a recognition that it's almost like a Maoist cultural revolution that's happening in different institutions? And is that seen as a threat to prosperity? Are we missing the plot when we can't have healthy debate and discussion with people across the political spectrum because we're dealing with an alien ideology that sees everything through this kind of Marxist lens? It's hard to believe we're here today, but are you seeing the same trends in your country?
Well, I'll answer that question in a kind of roundabout way because I give a lot of talks around the country. I'm working on the campaign and, talk to,
Mhm.
conservative groups and business groups and, all sorts of organizations. And, I always say that, if you wanted to destroy a country like the United States, well, what are the kinds of things you would do if you were Dr.
Hmm.
Evil and you wanted to destroy
Yes,
America? Well,
exactly.
first of all, you would lose control of the border, right? You'd let anybody come in. The second thing you'd
Mhm.
do is you would devalue the value of the currency. Oh, yeah, Biden's done that. The third thing you would do is destroy its energy sources. Well, we're doing that. The fourth
Yeah,
thing you would
right.
do is let crime run rampant and not put criminals in jail. Oh, yeah, we're doing that. The next thing you would do is run up your national debt so that you can't pay your bills. Oh, yeah, we're doing that. So we're doing all the wrong things. And, I'm always asked by audiences, is this some kind of, is this some kind of intentional scheme by the left. I don't know.
Yes.
Is their strategy to burn down the village so they can rebuild it? And I always say, look, I don't know what their intentions are. I don't like to get into people's
Mhm.
motivations. But
Yeah.
if you did want to destroy the United States, you'd do all the things that Joe Biden is doing. And same thing in Canada. If you wanted to destroy Canada, you'd pretty much use the playbook that you're using now.
Well, and on top of that, you try to regulate the internet and
Yeah.
censor people's basic speech. You'd position it so
Yes.
you'd get rid of the freedom of speech, the ability to innovate, to have discussion as you search for truth. I mean, it is a really good question. Is this all kind of deliberate? It makes you really wonder. Or is it just really incompetent, bad public policy? So, as we look to our situation, one of the words or theories that comes to my mind is this whole world of modern monetary theory, the whole idea that money grows on trees, that big deficits over time doesn't matter. And I get it. If you borrow money for building a bridge, a capital piece of infrastructure that can be used by different generations, hey, borrow money. It makes sense. It improves your productivity and makes life better. But we've
Yeah.
gone way beyond that. We're racking up deficits like the tomorrow doesn't count. I mean, this is going to all have to be paid back by the next generation and their kids. So, does anyone really believe in modern monetary theory? What are they drinking to be able to justify this kind of prolific spending?
Well, you're right that it's not just a fiscal issue, it's a morality issue. As
It's a
what great
moral issue.
country passes
Yes.
its debts on to its children and grandchildren? Now, I want to end this interview on a positive note because I do believe, for example, if Trump wins and we put back in place a pro-growth set of policies, the most important thing for the United States and Canada now, because you have a debt problem there as we do here,
Mhm.
the most important thing is to make sure your economy is growing faster than your debt, right? Growth
Indeed.
is the solution to so many problems, and prosperity is. That's why we call our group the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. So, if you have a change of leadership in Canada and we have a change of leadership in the United States, and we get
Mhm.
back on the kind of Reagan Trump, uh, you know, um, policy track towards prosperity, and we can grow our
Mhm.
economy at 3 or 4%, and we can do that then some of these problems start to go away. Albert Einstein said that the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest. So if you put in your, budget models 3 to 4% growth, guess what? You start to see, the private sector outgrow the government. And that's what we need to
Hmm.
do. We've been seeing in Canada and the United States, government take more and more and more of our GDP. You want to reverse that trend so it's starting to kind of take up less and less. This isn't complicated, folks. All you have to do, grow your private sector, put a leash on your public sector, start to pay your bills, have a pro-growth tax policy with low tax rates and a broad tax base, have a system where your regulations are not destroying your industry, produce all the energy you can because it's a freebie. It's like manna from heaven. And if we do that in the United States and we do that in Canada, we're going to see North America. I love this idea of Canada, the United States, and Mexico being the center of the global economy. And we are, and we want to continue to be. I love the Canada, US, Mexico free trade zone because we're the center of civilization right now. And we can't, and if, as Reagan would say, if we don't get it right, nobody else in the world will. It's been a great, great pleasure to be with you. And I so appreciate the opportunity to come on your show.
Well, thank you, Steve. I like your formula. I like your vision, and keep up the great work. Thank you so much for joining us.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Leaders on the Frontier. We're a nonpartisan think tank. We explore ideas, policy, and practical solutions that can make a difference in the lives of Canadians. We do not accept any government funding. We work for you. Thank you for supporting Frontier. Visit fcpp.org to give. While you're there, be sure to check out our latest articles and research. Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.